Wasn't in my bio, another hobby I have is playing video games. I enjoy playing video games as a way to relax and get my mind off the craziness that is happening in the world around me. There's a racing game called Forza that I've spent way too much time playing. And even though I've played it a lot, I'm not very good at it. I will frequently take a turn way too quickly and crash or spin out of control, falling far behind the other race cars with no chance of ever catching up. One of the reasons I enjoy this game so much is that it has a rewind feature. Rather than having to start the race over and hoping to do better next time, I can just rewind to before the crash and hope and try braking a little earlier or taking a different path around the car in front of me. There are many times when I wish this rewind option existed in real life. Looking back, have there been times when you made a quick decision and wished you could go back and think it through more carefully? While there are no rewound buttons in church life, there is a sort of pause button, and that is reflected in our covenant that we have together. Many of you might not be aware that we as a congregation have a behavioral covenant. It was adopted over a decade ago, and we don't refer to it as often as we should. Our covenant gives us the opportunity to pause and reflect, to remind ourselves who we want to be with, and when we act in dishonorable ways, our covenants and the members of this congregation invite us to come back into right relationship so that together we can continue the good work of this community. The Reverend Kimberly DeBoss says that the idea is as old as, well, some of the oldest writings in the Hebrew scripture, really, beginning in Genesis with a guy called Noah. After the flood, God and Noah made a covenant, which seems more like an authoritarian rule. As long as the people stay in line, there will be no more floods. Well, this might be the first covenant ever made. It's not a great example because of the power dynamic that exists. If the biblical God doesn't like the way humans do, then God sends another flood, and there isn't much anything humans can do to stop it. While this and other covenants in the Bible are somewhat problematic, the Reverend Joe Von Roo says, covenant lies at the heart of our UU faith, a shared agreement on how we should be together. Our religion is made from an ongoing, interlocking, and organically growing series of promises we make with our communities, congregations, and the world. Our 7 principles of faith each begin with a statement: we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. Our UU principles and our behavioral covenant guides us in how we should interact with one another in our congregation, as well as the wider community and the world. We as a faith recognize that we are all part of the interconnected web of life, which means that we need each other. We cannot be a society if we are not willing to build relationships and covenant with one another. Unlike the covenant between Noah and God, our UUCWV covenant puts us all on a level playing field. Our covenant doesn't make a distinction between me as the board president and someone who walks through our doors for the first time. Our covenant said, these are the promises made among the members of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Wyoming Valley, and to which our members, friends, and participants may hold each other accountable. In order for us to have a healthy congregation, it is our collective responsibility to hold each other accountable when we stray from the promises we make to each other. Relationships with anyone can be complicated. After all, we are just imperfect humans moving through this world together. Our covenant states we will assume the best intentions in others and examine our own intentions. It is very easy to think that someone's actions were done purposefully to hurt us. But if we re-examine what happened and assume the best intentions in others, hopefully we can see that there was just an accident or an oversight and not intended to cause harm. I fall short of this from time to time, such as when I enter the church and see a mess left behind by someone else. My first thought is usually, how can someone be so disrespectful of our shared space? However, maybe that person got an urgent call that their child was sick and they needed to pick them up. Now, assuming that others have the best intentions doesn't mean that we should give everyone a free pass over and over again. Instead, it means that before we get upset with them, we should ask them why they weren't able to clean up the mess before they left. Another part of our covenant that I sometimes struggles with is where it says we will communicate directly with no triangulation or anonymous complaints. Let me take a moment to explain what triangulation is. Triangulation is when person A has a problem with person B. Rather than person A going directly to person B, they decide to go to person C about their problem with person B, because often direct conversation is challenging. When we triangulate, we don't give all space for honest, direct conversations to happen between person A and person B. Person C has no idea what actually happened, and it's just not healthy to bring an unrelated person into the conversation. There are times where we might not feel comfortable confronting the person directly. At this point, we can go to person C and say, I'm struggling with something that happened with person B, and I wonder if you can go with me to have this conversation. I know that I'm pretty conflict averse, and so it's much easier for me to complain about a person's behaviors or actions to someone else. And I know that I need to be better about directly communicating with people when issues arise. Who else here knows that they need to get better about direct communication in any facets of their lives? The last part of our covenant states that when conflicts do occur, we will deal with them before they become problems. Again, being the conflict averse person that I am, I often try to ignore conflicts and hope that they will just magically go away. Unfortunately, this frequently causes the issue to fester and grow worse. Here's the thing. I know everyone in this room is courageous and vulnerable souls. It's important for us to draw on those ideas of assuming best intentions when someone has hurt us, so that we can compassionately and respectfully approach them and say, I do not know your intentions. I assume you did not mean to hurt me when you said or did X thing. And I want to have a conversation with you about this thing that happened so that we can come into right relationship together. Our behavioral covenant is just the tool we need to help call each other back into covenant with one another. The Reverend Lisa Bovee Kemper writes, our covenants are the foundation structure that undergirds our communities. They are the promises that bind us together. Each one of us freely chooses to enter the covenant when we join the community as members, and the community itself is part of the promise. We do not make our promises to God or before God. We are not held accountable by some external force. We make our promises to and with this community. And entering into a covenant makes us accountable to one another. To live in covenant together, we must be compassionate enough to speak difficult truths, vulnerable enough to listen to those truths, and strong enough to work through them together. We must balance the needs of one with the needs of many. Our covenants invite us into authenticity and resilience, and they call us into broader, deeper, and wider practice of our shared faith. That rewind button in my video game I mentioned earlier, here's the piece of our covenant that can help us press rewind on our relationships. It says, we will remind members of their promises when they stray from our covenant, then forgive and begin in love. It acknowledges that we will make mistakes and fail to always uphold our covenant. This does not mean that when we fall short, we can just say oops and expect to be forgiven. What it does is it gives us a path forward to restore our relationships with each other and the larger community by being accountable for our actions, knowing we can be forgiven and welcomed back into the community when mistakes occur. Accountability is a cornerstone of healthy and thriving communities, and it is especially vital within our congregation. When we hold ourselves and each other accountable, we create a culture of trust, respect, and mutual support. When we know that others will follow through on their commitments and take responsibility for their actions, we feel more secure and confident in our relationships. This trust is essential for a cohesive and supportive community. When we are open about our intentions and honest about our shortcomings, we create an environment where everyone feels informed and included. This transparency helps prevent misunderstandings and conflicts. By holding each other accountable, we encourage personal and collective growth. Accountability challenges us to reflect on our actions, learn from our mistakes, and strive to do better. It pushes us to be our best selves and to support each other in their spiritual growth. When we hold each other accountable, we show that we care about each other's well-being and the health of our community. This mutual support deepens our connections and builds a stronger, more resilient congregation. By upholding our behavioral covenant and holding each other accountable, we model positive behavior for others. This sets a standard for how we interact with one another and demonstrates the values we hold dear. It also inspires others to follow suit and contribute to a positive and respectful community and culture. Accountability is not just about pointing out when someone has strayed from our covenant. It is about supporting each other in our communities and working together to create a healthy and vibrant community. By embracing accountability, we strengthen our bonds, foster a culture of trust and respect, and ensure that our congregation remains a place where everyone feels valued and supported. This is especially true in these tumultuous times we find ourselves in. We as a congregation need to be a place where we will respect each other even when we disagree. How many of you knew that was a line from our covenant? Think how much better our world would be if everyone could have respectful conversations even when they disagree. If we as a congregation can't be respectful in our disagreements, how can we possibly expect it to happen in the wider world? We need to model the change we want to occur. Just like in that racing game I mentioned earlier, we won't always take the perfect line through life's curves. We'll sometimes accelerate when we should brake or veer when we should stay steady. But unlike the virtual races, we can't simply hit rewind when things go wrong in our relationships. What we have instead is something far more precious. We have each other and we have our covenant. This covenant isn't just words on paper gathering dust for over a decade. It's a living and breathing promise that says, we see you in all your beautiful imperfections. We hold space for your stumbles and your triumphs. We commit to walking beside you even when, especially when, the path gets rocky. Every time we choose to have difficult conversations instead of triangulating, every time we assume the best intentions, even when it's hard, every time we forgive and begin again in love, we're not just upholding a covenant, we're building the beloved community we dream about, one honest interaction at a time. So let us leave here today, not with a wish for a rewind button, but with something better. The courage to be accountably human together, the wisdom to forgive, the faith that holds fast to our promises. We create a congregation worthy of our highest ideals. May it be so, and may we be the ones to make it so. Our second song is number 298 in the Gray Hymnal, Wake Now My Senses.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being alone. Keep the web of creation your foot. Living, receiving of sound. Wake now my reason, wake to the join with each other, rest for the Take now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of sorrow, take as your labor, cross danger and threat. And striving their hardship to end. Break now my conscience with justice thy God. Join with all people whose words are in let no ever embraces of all human race. Take now my living and spirit, brighten my dark way, and my glory will transform.
Please join me in the closing words. In
Things essential, unity. In things circumstantial, liberty. In things yet to be, courage.
And in
In
all
all things, wisdom and love.
I would like to thank everybody who made the service possible. Margaret and Rob for their amazing music. Jill for pitching in and doing tech for today's service. And it was my pleasure to be the speaker and the convener for today. As Unitarian Universalists, using your voice is vital to our success as a whole. Use your voice today